Overall, the first example of a critical reflection on an observed lesson that you've read is a good assignment. I'll give an overview first. In terms of the content and expected learning outcomes, we can see the student gives an overview of the lesson and then each stage, identifies a number of teacher roles. These are underlined by the student, for example, controller, receiver, and at points they comment briefly on the student role. The roles and rationale for these are linked to reading, although it's mainly basic introductory reading and primarily reliant on one source. What there's very little of is a discussion of the concepts and terms for describing teacher roles. This could be done by comparing definitions between writers, and even within this assignment, by differentiating, for instance, between organiser, controller and manager, or between prompt and facilitator. This would then show more critical analysis and engagement. There could also be more on the relationship between the role the teacher and learners take at any point and the main aims of the lessons and stages. For example, in stage 2 section, why does the teacher want the students to reflect on their own writing? And in stage 4 of the lesson, what sort of feedback is given by the teacher and why? This would demonstrate more understanding of the underlying principles of language learning and teaching and make it a stronger piece of work. Now let's go through the essay and look in a little bit more detail. In terms of organisation, the essay assignment is clearly set out. There are subsections for each section, and the student cross-references clearly, here using a footnote, to the observation notes in the appendix, although it could be a little clearer what major task refers to. As we've said, each section has a brief introduction to the stage, and then the writer is quite systematic in first explaining briefly what the teacher did, identifying a relevant role, and then linking this to the reading. As we've said though, this is basic introductory reading only though. We can also see, if we scroll down, for example, at points 2, here they mention the student's role, but this is quite limited in this assignment. The writer also makes use of examples taken from the observation notes. This helps to illustrate the points and make a clear link between the principles or concepts and the actual lesson. So we can see them linking theory and practice. If we scroll down, any of the points marked number 8 show them illustrating some examples from their observed lesson. The assignment would be even stronger though if there was more comparison of roles, the concepts discussed, and more discussion. For example, comparing prompter in stage 3, if we scroll down here, they talk about prompter at 9a, a tutor here, and then compare it with tutor later on in stage 5, which you'll see if you scroll down in note 9b. In both examples, the writer says the teacher asks questions, but they don't explain why there might be a different term for the teacher, either prompter or tutor. In terms of academic style and conventions, this is generally fine, although the writer could be a little more objective at times. Rather than stating points as their opinion, for example, instead of I suggest, they could just say the teacher could. And instead of this is a good point, they could just say this is a good point instead of I think this is a good point. Although they do go on to relate their points to the reading, which is good. Some of the linking between sentences is somewhat informal. If we go down to this section here, for example, we see quite a lot of simple, more conversational linking words used at the beginning of sentences. So and so. You can see a number of these examples in the section 4, stage 4 section. These tend to be less common in this position in academic writing. The student also, though, shows they can use references, that is referring to their reading, but they mainly use quotes. These are done appropriately in that they're following conventions by giving the author, the year and the page number. So if we look at example here for number 12, this is a quote, so they have the author, year and page number. But they could make more use of, for example, summarising now. The sources are used to support and explain their points though, which is good. The final reference list, we go down at the bottom, is also fine. It has books and the articles the writer has read and cited in the essay. Although the journal article given here, it should be the journal article. That's in italics, not the article name. So overall, this is quite clearly organised, covers the main learning outcomes in that roles are identified, but it needs to include more critical engagement and discussion, make more reference to a wider range of readings, and it needs to consider the roles in relation to the aims of the lesson. This would make it a stronger assignment.